And I'm just going to introduce Kasley, who is the author of the newly released book, The Art and Science of Connection: Why Social Health is the Missing Key to Living Longer, Healthier, and Happier. She's a Harvard trained social scientist, award winning, right? Innovator and leading expert in social health, the dimension of well being that stems from relationships. Kasley champions social health as a strategic advisor, a keynote speaker, and founder of Social Health Labs, a national nonprofit that empowers community builders. Welcome, Kasley. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. I am honored to collaborate with you on this, and it is amazing to see everyone joining from around the world. Thank you all for making time for this.
All right, let's get it going. It's very juicy. I want to know what inspired you to write The Art and Science of Connection.
This is a great question. This book has been a long time in the making, and it really stems from personal experiences. I mean, you read my bio, and this has been a professional journey for me exploring the art and science of connection over the past more than a decade, through my work as a social scientist, as a nonprofit founder, as a community builder. But on a personal level, connection is hard. And I've always been interested in and fascinated by how we can get better at it and what the research tells us about what we can do to be better at it and what lived experiences tell us we can do. And so from a very young age, I remember, watching on the playground as my friends played and seeing the different group dynamics emerge and at school and trying to make sense of that. I'm also an introvert and, in a very extroverted world. And so early in my career, trying to navigate what that meant, what that looked like for me, how to thrive as an introvert, someone who likes a balance of socializing and solitude. And also moving around multiple times. I've moved to multiple cities, different countries, and had to start fresh each time, building a new community, making new friends, and so on. So there's been this theme throughout my life of kind of exploring connection personally, and then turning to my work to really understand in the research what we can do, and then apply that in real world programs.
I love that. I think that it's so important in all levels, right? Even I love that you explain how this is something that has accompanied you through all your life since you were very little. And I think it's so important to all of us since we're very little, right? Like we see all the connections that we can make, and it's so hard. It really is hard to make these connections. So we needed this book, and we need you to keep on explaining to us what is social health, what really is
Yes.
social health, and why is it so important for our overall well-being.
Yes, this is great. So, social health I define as the dimension of your overall health and well being that comes from connection, that comes from the relationships you have with friends, with family, with coworkers, with neighbors, with your community. And so, if you think about physical health as really being about your body, and then mental health as really being about your mind, social health is about your relationships and your sense of community. And at this point in the research, truly decades and thousands of studies have shown that human connection determines not just how happy we feel, but also how long we live and how healthy we are while alive. So, for example, people who have more meaningful connections have a lower risk of things like heart disease, stroke, diabetes, dementia, and many other things, depression, and so on. And at the very extreme end, people who have more meaningful connections throughout their life and feel supported actually live longer. So, this is also associated with mortality. And one of the more surprising findings that I've come across in my research is that there was a study done in the early 70s that followed people for about 8 years, almost a decade, followed thousands of people and monitored, who lived, who did not. Men who were lonely at the start of that study were 2 times more likely to pass away in the following decade. And women who were lonely at the start and had fewer social and community ties were almost 3 times more likely to pass away. So it's literally a life or death matter as to whether we have these connections. They're not just nice to have, it's actually essential for our overall health and longevity. So yeah, that's why social health is so important, and yet it's been largely forgotten in kind of public conversation.
I was gonna say, right? Like this has been emergent lately, and it's so important. What you're saying is so important that we're aware of this. It's not just that having friends and that, having that girls' night out is important or boys' night out is important. It's much more crucial than that. It's much more important. How do you think social health has evolved over the years, and why is it gaining this traction currently?
Yeah, it's funny because each of those interactions, we don't necessarily realize their importance. I mean, literally when you have dinner with your family, or you invite a coworker to lunch, or you chat with your neighbor over the fence or in the hallway of your apartment building, each of those interactions is affecting your health and it's affecting their health. And so the power that we have to influence our lives, I mean, we are all superhuman in a sense. We are literally shaping the trajectory of our lives through each interaction that we have with other people. So the understanding of social health really is emerging. And if you think about it historically, what we understand about health, what it means to be healthy, what we do to be healthy, evolves over time, right? As we have new scientific advancements that come out, as there's greater public awareness initiatives, as policy changes, and so on. And over time, that has evolved our understanding. So we've evolved from recognizing that physical health is important to now mental health is a huge part of the public conversation. And most, if not all of us, recognize that emotions and thoughts and our inner worlds are as important to our overall health and well-being as, exercising and getting a good night's sleep. So now we're at this point where we're kind of on the next iteration, the next shift in our collective understanding of recognizing that catching up with all the research that's out there, relationships are as important to our health as those other ingredients. And so, what we're going to see, and what I really believe, is that the future of health and the next wave in our understanding is social, right? It's about understanding that health is not just physical and mental, it's also social. And that's empowering because that's something that all of us have agency over and can do a lot to change.
I love this. What do you think are the common challenges people face in cultivating this so important social health that we're talking about? And how can people overcome them?
Yes, this is a great question. And a lot of the research shows that a lot of us do struggle with being socially healthy. There are some really worrisome trends in terms of widespread loneliness, but also the number of friends that we have has gone down in recent decades, and the amount of time that we spend with our friends has gone down. The number of communities that we belong to has gone down. So there are different trends indicating that we really need to double down and invest in our social health because um, it doesn't seem to be working. There's something wrong in society that it's not quite working. So, one of the challenges that I see a lot and that I write about in the book is actually our own limiting beliefs. And I see that in a lot of cases with people who are feeling lonely. Sometimes it's very easy for all of us to kind of get stuck in these negative thought patterns where maybe we feel a little bit disconnected and we assume that that means maybe we're not lovable. Or maybe we feel socially anxious going into social interactions. And these kinds of negative thoughts can actually mean that when we do show up and engage with other people, we're more self-conscious, we're less confident, we're less likely to kind of open up and be able to connect in meaningful ways to actually overcome that. And so it can be kind of debilitating in that way. And that's why in the research, one of the most effective ways to overcome true loneliness is to work with a therapist on tackling those limiting beliefs and help change those so that we can go into our social lives more confidently. But there are some really kind of interesting studies that I've come across and that I write about in the book that I think are illuminating and empowering, certainly for me and for other people as well. So, for example, one example is that numerous studies have found that people underestimate how much others like them and how much others appreciate hearing from them. So, for example, there was a study done where the researchers paired up complete strangers to have conversations for 5 minutes. And then they separated those strangers and they asked them individually, how much did you like the other person? And how much do you think that person liked you? And they found that people consistently underestimated how much the other person liked them. So, in other words, when you're chatting with someone, chances are they like you more than you think. And similarly, researchers have examined the effects of sending a simple text message or a simple email to people saying, hey, thinking of you, or I know you're going through a rough time right now, and I just wanted to say I care and I'm here and support you, right? Little simple messages like that. Again, what the data shows is that people significantly underestimate how much others appreciate those. So these are the kinds of sort of mindset shifts where it's very illuminating to recognize that, first of all, probably people like you more than you think, which I find helpful for sure. But also,
Absolutely.
your outreach matters, and even those simple gestures can be really empowering. There's other fun neuroscience examples too. So, for example, in one study, people were getting mild electric shocks. Not sure who signs up to partake in these experiments, but that was the study. And they found that if people were looking at a photo of their loved ones, like of their romantic partner, for example, while getting those electric shocks, they experienced less activation in the brain regions associated with pain and reported feeling less afraid than if they were looking at a photo of a complete stranger. So simply just literally looking at a photo next time you get your blood drawn, for example, or you have to get a shot or something like that, just something as simple as looking at a photo of your loved one and feeling connected to them can change your experience of pain and fear, which is really remarkable. So again, some of these kind of simple insights can really help us to be empowered to go out and take charge of our own social health.
That is extremely powerful because there's little things that we can do, right? Every day, I know I struggle getting blood drawn. No, I'm not the only one out there. But it's definitely a great feeling to have that we can do something easily about it. And when you were mentioning like the interactions that I'm reassured now that people like me more than I think, which is wonderful to just think about. But like the interactions that you can have with a neighbor, just saying hi, how are you? They're, they're short-lived. It's still something of your day. But then what are some key strategies for building and maintaining meaningful relationships, right? Like those really meaningful relationships around that we are kind of missing nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Because let's face it, I mean, those simple interactions are meaningful in some ways, and the data supports that. But at the end of the day, we all want to feel loved and to feel like we're understood and cared for, that we belong, that we matter. That's so crucial to who we are as humans. And so, like you said, those deeper relationships really matter. The first step in all of this is making it a priority. And we're all busy. We've all got a lot going on, and there are ups and downs in life that we have to navigate. But ensuring that we make time to really spend time with our loved ones or give them a call or be present when we're sitting down at a meal with our kids or call your grandparent or your grandkid who you haven't spoken to in a while, actually building rituals around that and weaving that into our day to day is so important. I mean, you might prioritize working out once or more a week. And in that same way, you need to be intentional, or you will benefit from being intentional and ritualistic about connection in your day to day life. The second step in all of this is really understanding your own needs and preferences, right? I mentioned earlier that I'm an introvert and I saw some people in the chat saying, "Yep, me too."
Mhm.
I have different needs and preferences than someone who's very extroverted and who likes being around people all the time. And in the book, I distinguish between these four different social health styles, which are really based on not just the amount of interaction that you like, which gets at kind of introversion and extroversion, but also the type of connection that you like and that you gravitate toward. Are you someone who wants to immediately skip the small talk and go deep with people and really, get to the heart of the matter? Are you someone who's more comfortable with chit chat and making people feel welcome around you, right? We all have different preferences, different personalities, different habits around this. And so the four styles that I talk about in the book are first a butterfly. So this is someone who likes a lot of casual interaction. There's a wallflower, who's someone who likes a little bit less casual interaction. A firefly, which is me, so someone who prefers a little bit of interaction, but going really deep during that. And then lastly, an evergreen, so someone who likes a lot of deep connection with their close loved ones. And I was grateful to partner with the New York Times on a quiz that helps people kind of evaluate which of those four styles they are most likely to be. And then the book goes into a lot more detail on it. But that's kind of just a way of helping you think about what feels good to you because it's really subjective, right? There isn't like a blood test that you can draw to understand how socially healthy you are. It's about how you feel, right? How connected are you at this time in your life? So
Yeah,
that's the other really kind of key ingredient, and there's much more we could go into, but I'll pause there.
yeah. I was just gonna say, if you guys have not taken the quiz, it's in the event page. There's a link there. So, oh, my glasses. Go ahead and take
Mhm.
that quiz. It was a lot of fun. It was very cute and fun, and it will help you realize like what type, because this is also about you, about who you are, the type of person you are, and what works for you. Like you said, there's no what like one thing for everybody that works. You need to really realize who you are and do that introspective work to understand
Yes.
yourself, and so how you connect with others and what's going to make you happy. And so
Yeah.
in that sense, how does the relationship with ourselves actually play a role in our social health, and how can we strengthen that?
I love this question. The way I think about it and the way that is clear from the research is that connection with yourself is really a foundation for connection with others. And if you have a strong relationship with yourself, that's a springboard to then connect with others. And I'll share a personal story on this. When I was younger, it was very hard for me to open up to my friends about what was really going on. So, for example, in high school, my parents were going through a divorce. It was difficult and upsetting as divorces are. I never talked to a single friend about what that was like for me. They knew my parents were going through divorce. I didn't talk to them about the reality of what I was feeling and experiencing and struggling with through that. And in retrospect, I realized that that was a barrier to me actually having deeper friendships, right? The research shows, and one of the tips in my book is that self disclosing, so sharing personal things about yourself, is a way to build trust, to engender closeness, to deepen connections that you already have. And it takes a little bit of courage, but when you do it, it's clear that it brings people closer together, right? We need to be real with one another. And I struggled with that when I was younger. And then in my early 20s, I did this exercise that's called self compassion meditation. There's a wonderful researcher named Kristen Neff who has books on this and guided meditations on this. And the idea is that you turn the compassion and warmth and love that you feel for other people toward yourself. And you accept who you are and turn your love inward. And the first time I did one of these meditations and started reading about this, I have a vivid memory of sitting on my couch with tears streaming down my face because it was so powerful. I had never, it seems so obvious now when I say it, but I had never thought to turn that inward. And that was the kind of a turning point in me developing a really strong relationship with myself where I accepted what I was going through and my flaws and my good traits and, really started to love unconditionally who I am. And amazingly, that experience then helped me to open up to others and to be more intimate in my friendships and in my relationships with other people. And so that's a way of kind of showing that, relationship with oneself, with yourself, helps you then to connect with others. And there are other ways to go about that, but I think that's a really powerful one that I have tried firsthand and found success with.
I love that. That's so powerful, right? You were saying earlier how therapy is important, right? It's so crucial to our mental health. And how are you going to connect to others if you can't connect to yourself, right? Like there's a missing link there. We start with ourselves, and then we can go out and figure it out how to connect to others. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah.
So
And if
we've
I can
talked
just
about,
jump
yeah,
in,
go ahead.
Laura, on one thing I
Yes.
want to say about that is that it doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out with yourself, right? Like we're all works
Yeah.
in progress always. And when researching for the book, I talked to this researcher at Hinge actually, who does like studies dating and how people connect in romantic relationships. And one of her insights was that people who end up having the strongest relationships are working on themselves while working on their relationships with other people. So it's always kind of this continual work in progress. And so what I don't want people to think is, you have to have it all figured out with yourself and love yourself unconditionally before you can love others. Certainly not, but that can help and be a powerful way to have stronger connection with others too.
Yes, that is very important to point out. Thank you so much for pointing that out because obviously, who has everything worked out? I don't know a single person that has everything figured out.
Not me,
But
not
yes,
me.
thank you for reminding us of that. That is very important. What would you say if you were to pick your top takeaway from your book that you hope readers will apply into their life? What do you think would that be?
The top takeaway, I would say, is that connection is not a nice to have, it's essential. And that by prioritizing it, you will be benefiting your life, your health, your well being, how long you live, a sense of meaning and purpose. You'll also be benefiting others. And I think that's something that's really unique about social health when we think about physical health, for example, it doesn't directly benefit other people when you exercise and work out your physical muscles and, get a good night's sleep. That's really about benefiting your own physical health. But social health is about that bi-directional exchange with other people and with other communities that you care about. And so there's this beautiful thing with social health, which is that by strengthening your own, you're also benefiting others and connecting more meaningfully and helping other people improve their lives. So I love that kind of angle to it. And so yeah, just recognizing that your health is not just about your body and your mind, it's also about your relationships. That's the take home I would love everyone to leave with. And to feel
How
empowered
beautiful.
that there's a lot you can
Yeah,
do in simple ways to take charge of that.
absolutely. How beautiful is it that you can do something so powerful for yourself and at the same time really make a difference into other people's lives just by
Yeah.
reaching out, like you said earlier, and just making sure that you are connecting to others, not just in this casual way, but also making an effort to, make sure that the people around you are okay, that they, that you have that connection with them, and also putting down your phone, right?
Yeah,
Here and
totally.
there.
Put down your phone, definitely. Yeah, and that's one of the core I outline these five core principles in the book, and one of them is that it takes two to tango. And what I mean by that is it's a two-way street, right? Right? Our relationships need to be mutual, in order for them to be fulfilling. I'll give another example of kind of a fun tip and hack that everyone can do that again benefits your social health and the other person's social health and physical and mental health because they're all interconnected. I don't think I uh, really said that at the start, but another take home is that, you know, the way I like to think about it is that your overall health is like a temple, right? And there are different pillars that are supporting your overall health. You have a physical pillar, you have a mental pillar, you have a social pillar, you might have a spiritual pillar or an environmental pillar. And these all work together, right? It's by combining their strength that the overall temple is supported. And if you knock down one of them, the structural integrity of it all is going to be compromised. So it's these are interconnected. So back to one kind of tip that again is mutually beneficial. There was this beautiful study done where researchers followed people for 2 weeks and they measured how supported they felt, and also how many hugs they had. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, they infected them with a cold virus. Again, not sure who signs up to partake in these studies, but I'm grateful that they do. And what they found is that people who felt more supported and hugged more often had fewer cold symptoms. They were less likely to actually get sick when they were exposed to the cold virus. So, hugging people around you every day, right? Hug your parent or your child or your romantic partner. Those hugs actually strengthen your immune system and the other person's immune system, which blows my mind. A hug a day keeps the doctor a day. That is a great tip for everyone to follow.
So, is there, because I think I've read about, how powerful touch is there, I think there's a minimum, right, of this hug time. I think is it 10 seconds?
Can't remember. You're right. There has been research on that for what's the minimum for kind of an oxytocin release and getting all those happy hormones going.
Right.
I can't, it's something like 10 seconds. I'll have to double check that after, but yes, the longer the
So
better.
make sure you hug, right? And then you hug hard. We want to
Exactly.
hug with our hearts, and that takes about 10 seconds at least. That is so
Exactly.
powerful. It's not just the touch, the connection, but also you get in less symptoms of a cold. Who doesn't want that, right? Let's just all hug each other and love each other. Um, what we talked about, putting our phones down and how
Mhm.
our society has been losing a bit of the connections that we used to have, the communities that we used to have. We used to have a lot more of this. Um, I wanted to touch up on future trends. What are
Mhm.
future trends that you see in social health and connection, and how can we prepare ourselves for this? Everything's constantly changing around us, so I feel
Mhm.
like we need to be better prepared to handle.
Yeah, this is a great question. So, in a similar way, we've seen is that as our understanding of health has evolved over time, from physical to also broadening to recognize that mental health is core to overall health, we've seen this wave of innovation and truly a booming industry around mental health, right? With many
Mhm.
options for making therapy more accessible. Now you can see a therapist online, virtually. There are options ranging from very expensive to actually free, and a whole ecosystem of innovation around that. All kinds of tools, apps, products, various things, places you can go to help support your mental health. In that same vein, the next frontier, I believe, is going to be innovation in social health. And I think that when you talk about kind of trends and where we're going, I'm excited about the amount of attention that this issue is getting. Last year, the US Surgeon General issued an advisory declaring loneliness a public health epidemic in the US and proposing steps forward that we can take collectively to change our society. Last year, the World Health Organization launched a commission on social connection, again, recognizing that this is about health. It's not just, some touchy feely thing. It's connection is core to our health. And there are many other initiatives like that underway. And in fact, in the last few years alone, the way this has risen up in the conversation, I see headlines in the news every single day about these themes, which is so great because, again, that's shifting how we think about what it means to be healthy. there are certain innovations that I think are very interesting and exciting. So, one that I write about in the book is social fitness gyms. So, dedicated places you can go to exercise your social muscles. So, just like you would go to a gym normally to exercise your physical muscles, and you can do classes or you can hire a personal trainer and you can use the equipment, there are now already a couple examples, and I think there's going to be many more to come, of dedicated places you can go to learn the skills of meaningful human connection and to practice things like, sharing more intimate parts of yourself, or listening, or turning inward and connecting with yourself, right? All those different ingredients that we've talked about that go into being able to be socially healthy. So there are now social fitness gyms, and I think we're going to see many more in the years to come. Another example is the wave of apps that have emerged, right? So a common question I get is, how is social media affecting our social health? And we can dive into that. But I think it's safe to say that we're all kind of not enthralled with social media's effect on meaningful connection, right? Sure, it keeps us connected, but is it actually helping us connect in a deeper way? In some cases. But now there are thousands of startups that I've been tracking for years now, of innovators and entrepreneurs who are saying, let's design tech in a way that's actually beneficial for our social health, with bringing together older adults who are isolated in their homes and allowing them to connect virtually and then bring that offline. Finding ways for people who work remotely, like I do, and like I'm sure many of the people on the call do, to connect with their coworkers, even if they're at home on their computers, right? So, people who are really creating innovation in ways like that. The third and last trend I'll highlight, because it's one I'm very excited about, having worked in healthcare for many years, is what's called social prescribing. So, this is where doctors actually are asking their patients about their social health and prescribing prescriptions for community and for opportunities in their local neighborhoods to connect, to volunteer, to join activities, to make new friends, and to get engaged. This is something that's actually quite well established in the UK, but it's increasingly, there's a push and a wave coming to expand it in the US as well as many other countries around the world. I know we have people joining from all over, and there was a report last year that reported on it in so many countries, something like 30 different countries where this is actually a practice in place. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, again, as people recognize that, and as doctors and the healthcare system recognize that health is not just physical and mental, it's also social. I think collectively, it's exciting to see that there's a lot you and I can do at the individual level to deepen our relationships with friends, with family, with our communities. And we also need to set up the environment and the context for that to happen more easily. And that means policy, that means healthcare, that means technology, that means our education system, that means teaching our kids how to be socially healthy from a young age, right? Growing up in Vancouver, Canada, I took gym class as a mandatory part of school growing up. Why wouldn't we also teach social health, right? If we're learning to strengthen our bodies, we need to learn to strengthen our relationships as well. It's a core skill. So increasingly, I am seeing this kind of innovation happen across sectors and throughout levels of society and in countries around the world, where many people are working toward creating the conditions for us all to be more socially healthy. And so that's, again, a note of optimism to know that in addition to what you do in your day-to-day life with the people around you, increasingly there is going to be that kind of supportive ecosystem around you to thrive through social health.
So important, right? That it's just not us doing the work, but also the fact that we need a support from government policies, all of these right setups so that we can continue to strengthen that muscle, right?
Mhm.
I was going to share that I actually have put my little kid realizing this into a school that has a anti-bullying program where every day they have 15 minutes where they sit down and they ask, after patio time, they ask each other, what have we done? Is there anything that has hurt you? How are you feeling? Does anybody wants to express anything in a very open environment? And that is completely new to me. I don't know that any other school is doing this. So this is very new. And I've actually put in my kid in that school because of that, right? Because
Wow.
I really think it's so important that we develop that muscle and we can
Mhm.
say, well, this has happened and let's talk about it and let's
Mhm.
connect with each other. It's just not the regular setting that we used to, right? Like
Yeah.
growing up in the 80s, we didn't have that, or at least I didn't have that. So
Yeah.
important, all these things coming up.
That's incredible. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's very interesting. And I think sometimes people can have kind of a knee-jerk reaction to that, like kind of roll their eyes like, oh, it's so touchy-feely, like we're talking about our emotions. And but so many of us are struggling to feel connected in meaningful ways, right? Loneliness is very prevalent. 20% of adults worldwide say they don't have anyone they can reach out to for help, according to a global
A
study
lot of
done by
people.
Gallup a couple years ago, right? So if that's the case, what we're doing isn't working. And it's so important to develop these relational and social skills as a vital part of living more healthy, effective lives. And I also think, just beyond improving our health, it's about what are we living for? What are we doing here? If not for the opportunity to love and feel loved and go deeper, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
that's an inspiring example. Thank you for sharing that. It's very interesting.
of course, you inspire me. I wanted to touch up on social media. I know that we've lightly covered it a little bit. It is something that I think all of us worry about.
Mhm.
And I wanted to see what's your take on it. How is that changing how we connect with others? Is
Mhm.
it, I think it's both positive and negative, but I want you to tell me what you think. I think there's two different ways of looking at it, but please tell
Mhm.
me what you think about it and how is that affecting us in all these ways.
Yeah. Yes, it's a complex question and one that is really important for us all to be discussing right now because we've unleashed these new tools into our lives and they've become so embedded for many of us, and without fully necessarily understanding the ramifications. So, what the data shows is very mixed. So, for example, there are really wonderful ways in which social media and other forms of technology can connect us, right? So, for example, I share a story in my book of a woman who used a platform called Caring Bridge, which is a free platform when you are diagnosed with something like cancer or another condition, where your friends and family can go to one place to get updates and to provide support to you. So, rather than repeatedly saying different updates to all the people in your life, it's all in one centralized place. There's a checklist of ways that they can support you, things they can do to help if you need it, and a place to feel all your love in one spot. That's a beautiful example of technology connecting us in the best way possible, right? And literally helping people's health journeys. Um, However, there's also a lot of research showing that, you know, if we're using technology, if we're relying on technology for connection, especially social media, if we're using it as a substitute for in-person connection too much, then it can be detrimental. And it's interesting looking at some of the data on youth, for example, who say they love social in some cases. So you'll see a study where people are like, no, I need this. It's vital for me to connect with friends. And yet when they take a break for a few weeks and limit the amount of
Mhm.
time that they spend on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or whatever, they
Yeah,
end up having lower rates of loneliness just in that amount of time or lower rates of anxiety, right? So it's very kind of complex, conflicting information. What does that mean for you and me, right? What can we do? It's about being intentional about the ways we're using it and the amount of which the amount that we're using it, making sure that we're using it as a tool, not as a substitute, predominantly, right? That's not always possible. During COVID, I couldn't see my family who was in a different country for 2 years. And so my whole life of connection with my closest loved ones was on FaceTime and Zoom. But, recognizing where we can to prioritize in-person connection. And then the last thing I'll say on this topic is there's a section in my book that explores AI and human connection and the use of AI chatbots as companions, as friends, as romantic partners. And it's a very fascinating exploration, one that really was one of the more interesting things I feel like I researched in the pursuit of this book. Um, Increasingly, we're going to have to ask ourselves, what is the role that we want technology, AI, or other to play in our social health? And it's going to be up to these companies who are creating these tools to optimize them, but also up to us in terms of what we're choosing. So yes, it's complicated, but keep in mind there are ways to use it that are powerful. And then it's also important to disconnect and reconnect in person. Put that phone away and have a conversation with your loved one.
Yes, I think that you touched up on very important points while we were all in lockdown, and some of us, like you said, were completely disconnected from the outside world in different countries, couldn't see anybody. It was so powerful to be able to have these tools. But then we've gotten also into this routine of really being absorbed with this tools that I feel like you said, we need to put that phone down. We need to look into each other's eyes. And especially your youth that I think are grown up with this. They're so
Mhm.
used to, I don't think I'm the only one to see, a young group of guys or women or, like a mixed group just sitting on a bench, all with their phones and just looking at their phones and not looking at each other.
And
And
I'm guilty of it too, right? Like we all
right,
do it. Yeah.
yes, we all do it. And to a certain extent, we need to just really be mindful that we are doing it, right? Because it's become such a automatic thing to do
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
we just grab our phones constantly and just have to be more mindful. Last question before we dive into the Q&A. I
Mhm.
wanted it to ask you, and I know you've shared some very surprising things, but I wanted to ask you through your discoveries in the process of writing this book, would you tell me like something extremely surprising that really shocked you and where you weren't expecting?
Yes. There've been so many things. Honestly, I'm excited for everyone to read the book because there hopefully will be many insights that give you that reaction. I think one of the more surprising things for me was, first of all, how when you start to have conversations about this topic, almost everyone can relate and kind of it brings down the walls. And I think
Hmm.
that if everyone here on this call right now or listening to the recording later on were to go talk to someone and say, "Hey, I listened to this interesting talk," or hopefully you find it interesting. I listened to this talk and it got me thinking about, my social health. And have you heard of this term? And it's really interesting. Research shows a lot of people are lonely right now. If you start to have these conversations, it's amazing where what people will share about their own personal experiences. It truly is a unifier, and I think that speaks to the humanity of this. A fundamental human need is to connect and to feel a sense of belonging. And yet, I doubt there's a human alive who hasn't felt disconnected at some point or who hasn't felt rejected or anxious or otherwise at some point. And so, by having these conversations and normalizing, excuse me, that experience, it's really powerful. And I think that that'll actually help us move toward more meaningful connection because when we see that we're all relating around this, that's quite powerful. So that's kind of one of the meta things that has really surprised me, let alone the insights and the research actually in the book. It's really just that Gosh, we all as humans care about this and are trying to figure it out. And there are, proven steps in the research that we can look to for guidance. And then also being able to talk about it with one another can really open up some new connection.
How timely is it that this is a unifier? How timely is that, right? When we see in the world how not unified we are,
Yeah.
and this is actually a unifier. There's nothing that all of us have not experienced, being lonely or not feeling connected at some point, and how that can really makes us feel part of something and unify us. That's so powerful.
And
Before we go into the Q&A,
yeah.
yes, go ahead, please.
No, I could talk forever. It's okay. I'll pause there. I know we want to go into Q&A.
I want to just answer some questions because I know there's some burning questions out there. Before we go into the Q&A, tell us a little bit more about your book. We're adding the link in the chat, and here is the QR code for you guys to scan and go get this book because it's lovely and wonderful. Tell us a little bit more about it. Where are we going to find it here?
Sure, yes. So The Art and Science of Connection is now available. It came out this week. I'm super excited to share it with everyone. This book is meant first and foremost as a toolkit for living a more socially connected life and for elevating social health in your day to day. And it's the culmination of over a decade now of exploring this topic. And it's also really kind of a manifesto and a call to action for us collectively as a society to prioritize social health alongside physical and mental health. And to, like I said, not just rely on us as individuals to take steps, but also to create the conditions in our world so that we can all be more socially healthy. So I am super excited to share it with you. I've been getting posts all week of people sharing photos with it, and it's so exciting to see. So I hope you will enjoy it.
Yes, get the book. This is important. This is really, like Kathleen said, a matter of life and death. So go get this book, get informed, make sure that you know what to do and how to improve your social health. I'm going to stop talking and start asking questions. That's what I really need to do because we need to um, get some answers from Kathleen. Let's see. Hannibal asked, how do you understand why men are more vulnerable to loneliness than women?
Yeah, this is a great question. Quite a few studies have come out in recent years showing that kind of men's friendships are taking a harder hit than women. Um,
Mhm,
and it's complicated. I think, and I'd be curious people's experiences in the chat too. Please feel free to share.
mhm,
One thing that I see in the literature, which is a bit of a stereotype, but I think there's truth in it, is that oftentimes in certain cultures, men are conditioned to be more reserved about their emotions, about what's really going on. And so that can be a barrier to deeper friendship. There's also a tendency when people get married and have kids and settle into a family for women to take on more social roles where they're engaging with other moms and really
mhm.
active. And again, these are generalizations, not always true, but there has been
Right.
historically a tendency toward this. And so oftentimes men will kind of lose touch with friendships and rely more on that romantic relationship for connection needs. One of the
Mhm,
principles I write about in the book is that it's really important to have diverse social ties. So being socially healthy
mhm,
means you're not just relying on one person to connect or for your emotional needs to be met. The data shows it's important to have diverse ties, right? Have friends who you call
mhm.
on, have coworkers who you interact with regularly, have friendly chats with neighbors and so on. Also to be part of groups, to belong to communities, to book clubs, to hiking groups, to, things like that where you're connecting with people around shared interests. Those kind of group belongings are really beneficial too. And also connecting with people across ages, across ethnicities,
Mm.
across cultures, right? Right here in this group, we have people from around the world joining today, and
Yes.
there's value in connecting across the different backgrounds that we come from, the different beliefs we have around religion or politics or whatever. There's value in that. So yeah, that's a few thoughts on it, but there've been some great articles that have come out in recent years, and it is something I explore a little bit in the book too.
I love that. Um, Someone said, I recently moved to a new city in a new country, and I'm increasingly aware of how lonely I feel. What can I do to help improve my social health when I literally know no one?
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, I feel you. This is hard. I have done this too. In fact, when I was younger, I moved to France and I didn't speak a word of the language. I didn't understand anything anyone was saying to me. I was enrolled in a public school. I knew no one. It was terrifying. And I had to figure out the language and make friends from scratch. It was very daunting and lonely at first. And so I want to normalize that that's an experience that many people go through when they move somewhere new, even if they do speak the language, right? One of the recommendations I would say is to do what you love with others. And so this is one of the tips in my book, which is about finding ways to do things that you're already interested in or that you already enjoy doing with other people as a way to make new friends and bond around something that's important to you. So if you
Hmm.
love reading, join a local book club at your local library. If you love hiking, join use Meetup to find a club where you can go on local hiking adventures, right? Um, Explore the hobbies and interests that you love with other people because that's a really easy way to find new friends, to start feeling connected to your community. And maybe you won't connect with everyone, but maybe there's one person who you really hit it off with, and that's a starting point. And it being centered around a shared experience like that is centering. It takes some of the pressure off. It's not a one-on-one conversation. You're doing something together. And the research shows that shared experiences as well as consistency, so doing them together over time, are really powerful ways to develop new friends and to deepen those friendships. So that's one suggestion that I know works.
That's great suggestions. I saw someone on the chat saying, where's the link for the New York Times quiz? It's in the event page. There's a link there. If I can, I'll resend the link in here. But if I can't, go to the event page. It's in there, and you can take that quiz for yourself. Someone asked, how does social health work in a remote workplace setting? Which you kind of touched up a little bit earlier. They said, I manage a team of 30 remote workers all over the world and would be curious to see if there are any ways to improve that from a manager perspective. Such a good
Mhm.
question.
Yeah, this is a really great question. Um, and it's one we could spend a whole day talking about, but I'll give you um, a couple a couple kind of simple suggestions. And this is a theme that's explored in the book too, so definitely check that out for deeper content. And I just had an article come out in Fast Company that explores this too. So if you want to check that out, that's on my website. But
Mhm.
one tip as a manager in particular is to, first of all, check in with your team members and ask them explicitly, do you feel connected to the team? What are ways that I can make sure that you feel supported working remotely?
Mhm.
Just showing that you care. I mean, that's you're connecting with that employee. Your relationship with them matters, right? So
Right.
really being intentional about the kinds of questions you ask.
Mhm.
There are also some fun things you can do. So for example, something that I love doing is setting a gratitude reminder. So put a reminder on your calendar every Friday to
Mhm.
send a note of appreciation to one person on your team and thank them for something they did that week or something about their something about them that you are grateful for, and just send them a note saying
Mhm.
thank you. um,
Yeah.
that alone to make people feel recognized, to show them that you're paying attention and that you care is going to help them feel connected and supported. So again, those are two kind of quick, easy things, but definitely things that matter.
Yes. How can someone called Jane asked, how can seniors make more connections? Practical, specific suggestions, please. How important?
Yes, I love that question. And a lot of the work I do is with older adults. I'm been on the board of a nonprofit in San Francisco for 7 years now, where we are all about building community among older adults locally. So that's near and dear to me. Um, so one of my recommendations would be to volunteer. And I'll tell you why. The first reason is that that's just a great way to meet new people and to feel connected to your community. The second
Mhm,
reason is that it's a way to get engaged around a sense of purpose and meaning. And I think there's this stereotype, at least in North America, where we kind of think of older adults as, as being liabilities rather than assets. Like, you have
mhm,
so much wisdom, you have a lifetime of more knowledge and expertise and skills than I do, right? Than any of us do who are younger. And so
absolutely.
putting those skills and your wisdom to use to help out your community, to connect with younger generations, to share what you've learned, um, I would appreciate, and I know many others will too. And also, loneliness can often be linked to a sense of a loss of meaning and purpose, right? It's like, why would I get out of bed if I don't have a reason to, or if I don't have a person to get out of bed for?
Mhm,
And so volunteering can be a great way to kind of overcome all of those things and continue contributing as you age.
mhm. Yes, I really love that.
Mhm.
I think it's very cultural, as you say. I do find that in Spain too. I feel like as a as a as a society, we need to do better to actually recognize that seniors are such an asset
Mhm.
to all of us. They have so much to offer, and we have so much to learn from them. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think that's very important to recognize. And you touched up on great points there for all the seniors out there. Last question, and this is really hard because there's so many questions, but I have to speak the last one. And this one that Dave asked, I think it's very interesting. I have a lot of social connections, which I maintain. What I am curious about is how to have deeper conversations with people. Being more vulnerable, is there a too much too soon? Is there any good books on having deeper connections?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I love it. So yes, there are, and I know we're almost out of time, so I'll answer very quickly. So yes, in the book, I explore this idea of how to have deeper conversations and share kind of specific questions that you can ask to spark those deeper conversations. And I say in the book that it's important to do so selectively. So you mentioned, is there like too much too soon? There can
Mhm,
be, right? It's about divulging with people we trust and with people who we think there is an opportunity to go deeper with. It's not appropriate to just share everything all the time with everyone. But yes, so one question, just to give you an example, a question that I love, and there are so many examples of great questions that you can ask to go a little bit deeper. One is, who's someone who had an important influence on you growing up, right? Who's one person who meant a lot to you growing up? Or um, what's a risk you've taken that has paid off? Right? These are ways to just learn something new about the other person. And it doesn't even have to be
mhm.
that intentional. It could be something just like, tell me more, showing curiosity in the other person when they're talking about something, showing that you're actually interested and engaged. That's one of the best ways to get closer to someone, because we all want to feel like the other person cares. So even something as simple as tell me more can be a way to go deeper.
I love that. Thank you so much because we all love to talk about ourselves, don't we? But telling more is the way to go. I love that. Thank you all so much. And thank you so much, Kathleen, for sharing all these enlightening tips to enrich your life and be more socially healthy, which is so important. Everyone go get the book. There is the link in there. There's also the link in the event page. And thank you so much. We'll put this up on our YouTube channel so you can revisit. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Kathleen, so much. And enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.
Thank you. And thank
Take
you
care.
everyone so much for joining. Happy social health.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.